So before asking for questions, I would like to say a few things about Eileen's talk. Um, the first is she talked about Sitagarbha, Jijang Bosal, Jizo in Japanese, being in hell until all beings are awakened from hell. And also she talked about how this is a special month when the ghosts and the hungry ghosts and the hell beings roam the earth. And I would just like to say that we right now are all in hell, and we all right now are in heaven. And this great vow to liberate all beings is something that we are all intimately part of, whether consciously or not. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. It's not so special to have hungry ghosts roaming the earth, because hungry ghosts are always roaming the earth. And their names are Carol and Nancy and Judy and Eileen and Mary and Marco and Lori and Narina and MD, who's internally connecting to audio, and Judith's iPad, and all the people in the Providence Zen Center. We're all hungry ghosts, and our job is to liberate all beings, which includes ourselves, from being hungry ghosts. That's the first thing I wanted to say. And the second thing I wanted to say is I wanted to talk a little bit about Ryonen Gyatsu, who Eileen talked about, the nun who burned her face in order to study Buddhism because she was so beautiful that she would not be allowed in any monastery in Japan. First of all, I heard it differently. I heard it that the hot iron was right there in front of the Zen master who was refusing her entrance, and she just simply picked up in front of him and burnt her face like that. Also, Eileen, I don't know about losing beauty. I mean, it's okay. Maybe we never had it, you know? You know, what one culture thinks is beautiful, another culture doesn't, so you don't have to worry about losing beauty as you age. You know, it's all right, you know. But anyway, Ryonen Gyatsu burned her face, and if anyone noticed that my eyes seemed to be not quite focused, it's because I was trying to look up the calligraphy that she did. She did a calligraphy she wrote a poem about this experience. And I almost thought of getting up and going to my bookshelf and getting the book down and showing it to you. And I tried to find it online, and I couldn't find it online. And it's a poem that basically said, you know, once I was beautiful, and then I burnt my face, and now, you know, I'm free, something like that. And she was a wonderful calligrapher. She was well known for her calligraphy. And you can find this calligraphy in a book called the Zen Source Book that my husband Stan Lombardo and me, and mostly Steve Addis, edited. And so I almost went up and got it to show you, but I didn't because it would be too disturbing. But the point is that there was a calligraphy exhibit in Kansas at the University Art Museum in Lawrence, where I live, about maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago. And this calligraphy was there. And I'd known the story. And by the way, it's not Hakuin, it's his teacher. Although Wikipedia thinks it's Hakuin, but it's not. It's his teacher. I get this from other teachers of Japanese lineage. But anyway, so it's Hakuin's teacher with the baby, and I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, so there was this calligraphy, and it was right there. It was physical. I'd known the story about Ryonen Gyatsu. I'd heard this story for many years, but there it was. This woman was real. She was palpable. And she left this physical evidence behind. It's not like a poem you read in a book. It's like her writing. It's her calligraphy. And I just, you know, even now I get chills just thinking about it, that this was like, I really wanted to touch it. I knew better, you know, there were guards around and stuff, but, you know, that this woman was real, and that she left this physical evidence through the centuries and across cultures, that she had done this, and she had freed herself, and she had freed all of us. So I just wanted to tell you that. And also, so Eileen told the story of the man who was the monk who was accused of impregnating this woman, and so the parents gave the baby, the woman's parents gave the baby to him, and he raised the baby for a few years, and the woman confessed, no, it wasn't the monk, and it's attributed to Hakuin, and that the monk is Hakuin, but it was not. It was Hakuin's teacher. But to me, the thing about that story that's so remarkable is not that he raised the baby without complaint, but it's that he was able to give it away. I mean, he was the baby's father for all intents and purposes. He raised that baby. That was who the baby knew in his life. And that he was able to just say, okay, baby, you should go back to the people who really want you. That's kind of incredible. And if you've ever known people who are foster parents, that's what they do. They take in people's children, knowing that they're not going to keep them. And they take them in and they love them, and then they give them up. And that's a remarkable thing to be able to do. To love somebody completely, and then to say, you're better off, it's better for you, and not try to hold on, and just say, I love you, and now you need to go where you belong. That's a really remarkable thing. So to me, that's the amazing thing about that story. So now I'll ask, are there any questions? Yeah, so if you look, let's take the example of African American culture. If you look at African American culture through the centuries, it's really clear that people were, in a very deep sense, already saved. You listen to gospel, black gospel music, and it's free. It's completely free. I mean, you listen to someone like Aretha Franklin, and this is real spiritual freedom. But at the same time, there's this terrible this terrible oppression. So spiritual freedom and awakening does not mean that there's not things that have to be fixed. Also, sometimes you run into someone who's maybe a life in prison sentence, someone who's been in prison for a long time, and they can be really free. They're in prison. They don't decide what they get to eat. They don't decide when they get to eat. They don't decide when they get to shower. I mean, their lives are so completely constricted. But even there, it's possible to have freedom. So that's the kind of liberation that Zen practice offers. That's the kind of liberation that any serious spiritual practice offers. But at the same time, there's suffering. The same person can be inside, they can be completely free. And yet at the same time, they're under terrible constraints and maybe physical pain. So at the same time, there's suffering. So this liberation that we all have can give us the energy and the direction to help with this other suffering, help alleviate this physical suffering. I mean, can you imagine living in Kabul right now? It's going to fall to the Taliban. They're completely surrounded. The government is trying to negotiate some kind of, peaceful transfer of power. I have no idea what that's going to mean. If you're living in Kabul right now, your world is just falling completely apart. You do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. You do not know if people are going to come and knock on your door. You do not know if you're going to be dragged out of your house. You do not know if your young daughter is going to be given away in marriage to somebody that she doesn't even know. You do not know any of that. If you're a woman, you don't know if tomorrow you'll be able to walk down the street to get a loaf of bread. You do not know. That is fundamentally all of our situation. And how do we find the inner strength to help each other in this situation that we're all in? So this liberation, we all have it. and we can all access it, but it's not a, oh, now I'm happy all the time. Woo-hoo-hoo, the world is great. All these people who like, this gratitude stuff, well, yeah, be grateful for what you should be grateful for. But, there's this kind of artificial level where you have to tell yourself you're happy all the time. No, don't do that. When you suffer, suffer completely 100%. And when someone else is suffering, help them completely 100% to the best of your capability. That's our job. Just be completely open. And this practice gives us the strength to do that. This practice gives us this strong center. It gives us this direction, this not for me direction. So it's not my life is falling apart. It's like we are in this together. We're just completely in this together and realizing that. So that's what our practice gives us, and this clear mind where you can see what is actually happening and not what you think is happening and not what you fear is happening, but you can actually see what is happening. Nobody's perfect. We're all a product of our time and place. So he's brought up a certain way. Just because you have this awakening doesn't mean you're not going to blow it all the time. So yeah, he was in this time and place where if a beautiful court woman came to you and said, I want to study in your monastery, there were women's temples, and she had actually practiced in the women's temples, but the women's temples, they weren't as serious. And this has been true until very recently in Buddhism, that not always, but often the women's temples, they didn't have the same access to like really strong practice or sutra study, or a lot of things. Maybe they would just chant, or maybe they would just do helpful things in the village or something like that, but they didn't have this really hard training that she wanted. I should say that in Korea there's a women's temple where I've been, and I think maybe Nancy, you've been there too, maybe Eileen, you've been there, where the women do is it a 3-year kyolche or a 1-year kyolche? I forget. 3 years, yeah. They do a kyolche for 3 years. 3 years. They sit in kyolche. That is called hard training, right? We do 3 months and we think we're pretty cool, but they do 3 years, So I'm not saying women are not capable of strong practice, Lord knows. But at that time, in Japan, the possibility of having strong training in a women's temple, it just didn't exist. And so she wanted to practice in a men's temple. But this guy, he's thinking, oh my God, my monks will be filled with lust and they won't be good monks. And that's all he's thinking about. He didn't trust his monks. It's the idea. A woman walks into a building and all the monks, they get erections or something like that. And boing, and so this kind of, cultural kind of, everyone has this kind of cultural blindness one way or another. Every culture has it. It just expresses itself differently. So yeah, so this guy's a product of his culture. It's not like you wake up and, then, you're free of all that. The Korean tradition is really great because in the Korean tradition, coming from Chinul, Chinul had 4 great awakenings, and every one of them took place in a library, which I really love. It's not, like he stumbles on the path and his foot hits a rock and then he wakes up, or he hears the temple bell in a distance and he wakes up, or he sees 2 people fighting in the street and he wakes up. No, he wakes up by opening a book in a library. And he had 4 big awakenings like this. And anyway, so Chinul's big thing, which was very different from the Chinese teaching of the time. Chinul was, I think, 11th century. So Chinul's big thing was waking up. The experience of waking up is a signal that you have to practice even harder. So it's not like you practice and practice and practice and then Zen show, and you wake up and everything's fabulous. No, it's not that. It's like you practice and you wake up, and then, oh my God, I have to practice more. And you practice and then you have another awakening. Whoa, oh, I have to practice more. So the idea is you have to practice, and he's very explicit about this. You have to keep practicing because you still have karma. And you have to cut through this karma. And the experience of awakening is not going to cut through that karma. So that's Chinul's teaching. And that's Korean tradition. And that explains why this Zen master, seeing this beautiful woman, would not let her in the monastery. Because, yeah, he had many awakenings probably, but he still had karma. And we all still have karma. And nobody is ever done. That's very important. No one is ever done. So thank you very much for your question.